Hi everyone, I'm revisiting Spellbook after 2 years, and here are the updates, things I liked, things that impressed me, things I didn't like, and we're going to discuss price value alternatives at the end. I've logged into the web application and it's pretty easy to navigate. They've separated the features individually, so review table, draw from precedents, edit document, compare differences, workflows, library, and then prompts and sources. The first feature that caught my attention is the review table. Going to click on it so we can access it. Let's say we're reviewing a franchise agreement. It's a long contract and there's a set of questions you're looking to answer from the contract as a checklist, and control F 50 times and then copying and pasting into a table would just take hours. So I initially thought that I could use this feature, but I don't think it's ultimately the best fit for M&A transactions and franchise agreements. I've uploaded the franchise agreement. And then you can start typing in your questions one at a time, or you can use the saved questions button. I thought you can import a set of questions, but to use that feature, I think you have to have saved them from a previous project. So unfortunately, since this is a new project, you can't just upload a set of questions. So you're going to have to paste them one by one individually, which also quite irritated me. Imagine you have 50 questions you want to ask on every franchise agreement. Initially, you're going to have to type each and every one of them. I'm going to just type 10 today, otherwise we'd be here forever. I'm just going to type 10. And the other thing is, if you try to paste all the questions at once, you'll get an error. So it will mess up the table. Okay, once you've added your questions, hit run. So Spellbook has generated the table. This is the document, and these are the individual columns. So each question will form its own column, and you'll get an answer from Spellbook based on the information that it's gathered from the agreement you uploaded. Now, some of these columns are blank, which I think is quite strange. As I was using it, I noticed that if I hit the renew button, the answer slightly changes on some of these columns. And I did this with a bunch of different questions and things that I was testing out. And so I had assumed that this arrow means refresh or try again, which I don't know, take it as you will. I find, you'd rather have something that quotes the document directly or that has citation so that you're certain that this isn't some generated answer, it's actually coming from the document. So it would have been nice to have proper citations where you can just toggle to what the agreement actually says, and you can see that on this side. For example, you'd have the document open on this side, and then you can click on the answer it's given and it can toggle to that area, highlight, etc. Just so you're certain that it's not hallucinating and creating information, because it makes it quite difficult. And unfortunately, to check these answers, you have to do the task again, which is the unfortunate thing. The other drawback that I touched on briefly was that you have to add questions individually, especially if it's the first task. And then after that, you can save the questions. So once you've initially added the questions, you can then save them. So initially, you just have to upload each question individually. After that, you can save the questions and reload them when you're reviewing another document or you're creating this table. You can add files while you're running this task. So if you decide to add another agreement, same client, add another agreement, ask same questions, or maybe you can have a bunch of these agreements, all your franchise agreements, same questions, run it as one whole table, which would be cool, but there are drawbacks that we discussed. It would have also been nice if you can just upload a document of all the questions at once initially, so you don't have to add each individual one at a time. If I was reviewing a 60-page franchise agreement or conducting due diligence across 500 contracts in an acquisition, the table review feature would make it very difficult to ask structured questions and receive a populated diligence table from which I can still reference the source information. And that's the biggest drawback. Now, maybe you can think of another use for this feature, which wouldn't be in a franchise transaction or a M&A transaction. I'd like to know what you think. But if it was different, if I was to give my own idea for the developers watching. This could be a really good review feature. Let's say you want to review multiple contracts against, say, new regulations in a sector or other geopolitical changes, such as oil price shocks, tariffs, etc., or vice versa. Let's say you have multiple pieces of legislation and you review a contract against those so that you can visually see where that contract falls short on those regulations in that sector. Just food for thought for developers. Let's move on to their contract review and redlining tool, which I'll just say from the outset, I actually liked. I think their contract and review feature is actually really good. And I think it's because it's what they predominantly do. When I did the first video, I did mention I really liked their review and drafting feature. I've uploaded a property management agreement that I'm going to ask Spellbook to review. Spellbook has finished reviewing the contract. Let's open it. This is the redlined version, and you have access to editing tools that you would have in Microsoft Word. If you scroll down, you can see the different changes that it's made. It's made some substantial changes. These are all red lines. Keep scrolling. It's actually made significant changes, by the way. We're not going to go through them, but I can assure you I did read them and they did seem like really good changes to make. These were initial drafts that I wanted to get Spellbook's opinion on. So if you have the time, I would encourage you to read Spellbook's redlining. I was actually quite impressed, which is, like I had said, I really did like their redlining tool. And these are the changes that they suggested. If you want to take a look at them in table format, restore prior approval rights for out-of-budget or material commitments, and preserve manager responsibility for third-party vendors. These are the issues that it's raised. These are the risks. It explains the risks and it highlights the sections in the contract. This is the citations I was referring to when I was saying in the table view, in the review table function, that you don't get access to this. So you can't really see the information and you can't verify. So yeah, these are the issues, the risks, and the recommendations. And it also recommends things like favorability in a contract, which provisions are favoring which party, it will highlight that, and suggestions based on that. Once you've finished redlining your document, or if you've received a redlined document, Spellbook has a feature where you can summarize red lines in documents, and it can read comments in those documents. So to go to that feature, you click New Project. What's strange is that I can't find the feature, but I could have sworn I saw summarize red lines. Well, we're going to have to just type it using the prompt. So we're going to have to go back to our agreement. You know what? It's essentially, I just thought about this. It's essentially done that with this table. So they had a feature that I saw, I can't find it, but it summarizes the red lines that it just made. And I just realized that it essentially did it by giving you this table. It summarized the red lines in this table format. So you don't have to ask for it, it'll give it to you. Or you can just prompt in this section here. And it's done a good job at summarizing the redlining on top of just doing the regular redlining. Let's move on. Spellbook also has a draft from precedents feature where you can upload an existing agreement and then Spellbook can use that agreement to generate a first draft tailored to a different transaction and a different client. So to access that feature, you can go to new project, draft from precedent, upload a precedent. I'm going to upload a franchise agreement and I'm going to prompt. Okay, so I've added a prompt and I wanted to do an initial draft of a franchise agreement. Franchise agreements are relatively niche and the language will need to be changed in most clauses. It's not a matter of just swapping names and figures in a document. I'm not going to give Spellbook any guidance. I want to see it pick it up and change those clauses. Now let's look at Spellbook's initial draft. We just scroll down, starts with basic introduction, background. There's no definitions. Typically there's definitions there. Okay, there we go. It's definitions below. TC, interpretation, grant of franchise, ETC, scope of rights. Now, because I know what the original looks like, I'll just show you. It looks like Spellbooks drafted a completely different document if I compare the two, they look very different. That's actually good in this case. Like I pointed out, if you don't change the language and clauses for the new franchise agreement, it would be poorly drafted. I like that Spellbook realized this, and I think it did a really good job. I just know this document, and you'll get a better idea of it when I'm comparing the two, the original and Spellbook's draft, which is what I'm going to show you now using their feature. They have a compare feature. You compare two different documents. Go to the compare feature, compare differences. I'm just going to use the standard prompt they have here. Upload the two agreements, as in the original and the one Spellbook drafted. Hit run. Okay, Spellbook has come up with a table showing the differences between the two agreements. Like I had mentioned, they do look different. I'll just expand this. And this is a summary of the differences, which are actually more significant than it looks. And by looking at this table, you understand why it made those changes. They make sense. Few things to point out. Overall, it improved the agreement and used the precedents as more of a boundary. And I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to just replace names and figures, but it drafted in favor of the franchisor, our client. It also added provisions which would be important for our gym, for example, and not for our standard client. So things like data management and privacy issues do arise for our gym client, but not for a restaurant, for example, which was the standard document I uploaded. Spellbook also added a provision around technology, which is relevant for a gym that will likely have tech systems, and then it will be collecting members' data, back to the data point I mentioned. Spellbook also added a provision for injuries, death, medical emergencies, and license suspensions, which would all be relevant for a gym, which is good. There's also the need to add a provision for membership contracts, forms, and cancellation procedures, which also would ordinarily not be an issue for restaurants unless they were running promotions and gathering data, which our examples typically don't do that. Spellbook also added that. Another provision which has been added is the late payment provision, which would be relevant for a gym for memberships and not our standard restaurant client because people typically just pay at the counter when they're paying for their food. All in all, Spellbook's drafting tool is pretty good. I like their drafting tool. I like their review tool. It'll save you some time in creating the initial draft. Now let's move on to workflows. Spellbook also has workflows that you can use to streamline the work you regularly do. Click on workflows, and you can either use one of Spellbook's existing workflows or you can create your own. They have workflows that extract data, ones that compare documents, and drafting workflows. These templates are similar to the tasks that we previously just performed. And I think the intention is that you'll be able to automate these processes. I'm just going to click create new workflow so that you can see the extent of these workflows. There are three things you can do. You can write prompts for Spellbook to follow. There's a second question step. You can ask the user to pick from options before continuing. And third, a file upload step that pauses the workflow and asks the user to attach a file before continuing. And that concludes all of the features on Spellbook's web application as of today. Remember that Spellbook is predominantly a drafting and reviewing software. There isn't much to automate, and it would be unfair to say that the workflows we have here are simple and don't do fancy tasks such as automating client intakes. Now, the most important factor is the pricing. For solo subscriptions, the price is $417 per month, and that's billed yearly. If you're looking for something cheaper but more sophisticated, I would suggest Gavel Executive, and Gavel has another component. I'm just forgetting what it's called. I'll also do trainings on Gavel soon, so you can see the differences. They have a workflow automation feature, and they also have review and contract drafting features. Thanks. Take care.